thought we'd offset some of the sobering content that we had thus far in the podcast, Bri, and really change it up and invite Action Jackson back. And fortunately, he was available. Hey, Tim.
Wow.
Hey, guys. How are you?
We're good, thanks.
Episode 175 isn't that far in the rearview mirror, Tim, but we needed you back here, and you're not going to disappoint us, are you?
You're not paying me, are you?
Well, I was going to say the rate is the same, so with inflation, it might not be as sweet, but it's great to have you back, Tim. And we were talking a lot about your adventure with the Winnebago during the last episode. I hope you got some mileage out of that, no pun intended. And in fact, you have covered a lot of miles since then, and you're here to talk about it. So thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
For those of you who did not catch that episode, Tim Action Jackson is the former proprietor of Action Fasteners up there in Washington State, and he sold that a few years back, and he's been doing his own thing and dipped his toe back into the fastener industry somewhat recently with some consulting things that he's doing. He'll talk a little bit about that today, but you've got a lot of observations, and you always have a lot to say. So where do we dig in?
I guess we dig in. I just got back from the Fastener show in Vegas. Brian was asking me, what did I think? You know, there's two ways of looking at it. Business-wise, I always try to look at it as I was a small business from a small area, and was it worth the money to send out? You know, it's $3,000 or $4,000 to send 3 or 4 people down there for 3 or 4 days. And what's your ROI? What's your return on investment? Having to be in the same, everybody in the same room is great. But I'd love it to be changed up a little bit and be exciting. And it's the same show I went to 28 years ago.
Oh, I don't know how you can say that. Didn't you notice the carpeting?
Well, a little bit. No, not really. That's to be honest. I get there and I don't get confused, but I'm like, where's everybody at? There's no flow to it, in my opinion. And like people in the same aisles, or I was telling Brian, I wish they had something that flashed or got my attention and said, we have something new. And those people got priority spots in the rows, right? If you got something new, you get the top places. If you got a new booth, new widget gadgets, you're going to get top places. And that would get people at least honed in to look for something. And when I came back, I didn't see anything new. I met a lot of the people. Star. I saw Mr. Bruce Wheeler there. I saw Bob Reynolds from Sequel. I saw the guys from WTC, guys that I wanted to see for Fall River, Dave Monty. Great seeing those guys.
Well, there's your ROI right there, Tim. I don't know. What were you expecting? It's the fastener industry.
Yeah, I mean, the nuts are sort of the same as they started making them in like 1850.
But I think we could do that too if it was in a big bar. I mean, all those people in the same place and we could talk. I guess that's not true, but.
Well, that idea is already taken anyway. You should listen to the opening of the last episode, because Tom Mazer from American Fastener Journal and Steve Regala from Bradley Coatings, they came up with the idea of the no-show show, where you basically just pay those guys $10,000 and then show up in a bar, and that's how you do it. It's an intriguing possibility.
The next day, you wouldn't remember anything about the day prior.
But you wouldn't care either.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
So there must have been some upsides to the show this year, though. I mean, I heard some very good things about it. It had a lot of positive reviews. I mean.
And what were those?
You are really in a pessimistic mood today, Tim.
No. I really would like to know, because I got in trouble at dinner I was with Carmen Vertullo and Doug Whelan, and Carmen asked us, how'd you like the show? And I said, it wasn't what I thought it would be. And he got kind of irritated at me and said, no, there was a lot of new things. I said, what was new? He said, there's a new coating. I said, well, I didn't hear about it. I didn't see a sign. Nobody handed me a coating piece. I just walked right by it. So that might be part of it too. It's not in my lane, right?
Well, you've been to a lot of fastener shows, and you've been doing a lot of exciting things. It might be a case of you're coming off of some other kind of high now, Tim, and I don't know if fastener shows are going to meet your expectations. You're doing other things to generate adrenaline these days, though, aren't you? I mean,
yeah, I've been doing some consulting. I just got done with I was a guest speaker at a company down in California, and that was an interesting move. I accepted the challenge to go and speak to these people. I didn't know anybody in the company, not a soul. So, and I had to learn the company real quick, and I went online and I learned about a bunch of different things that didn't really help me in the speech. But when I got there, I started telling my first story of how I got in the fastener business, because I hear you always saying, once you get in here, you never get out, which is probably true. When I got out of the Army, I went, 1985, I went to get a job, and I went to the unemployment office, and I said, I need a job. And the vet section there said, well, I got one job, and it's sweeping floors. And I said, dude, give me that job. He says, it's quarter over minimum wage, which is like, I don't know, $7, seven and a quarter, I think I got. I said, hell yeah, I'm in. I said, just give me the job. He goes, well, you're overqualified. I said, I'll be the best floor sweeper you've ever had. I go to the place. I don't know if you remember, but Cully sells fasteners to the electrical wholesale houses. They came from a company called Lila Robbins, which is the first company to push the square drive screw. So I go in, I get the interview, and Dave Hendricks says, you're kind of overqualified. I'm like, overqualified? I just learned how to kill people for 3 years. I have no skill set in the real world. How am I overqualified? He said, well, I'll give you a shot. So he gave me a shot, and I swept the floors. About 8 months later, the guy who owned it, excuse me, his name was Bill Proby. He walks back and he goes, yeah, young man. He said, how would you like to be outside sales representative? I said, I'd love it. He said, here's $100. Tomorrow, get a suit and a tie and come back, and you're going to be a salesman. I said, all right.
What year was this?
This was probably 1986. So I joined in 85. So it was probably mid 86.
Okay.
And I went outside after work, and there's my wife picking me up in our little Pinto, no air conditioning, auto, it wasn't automatic. It was on the floor.
0 bathrooms.
Yeah.
Oh, dude. And it came in, and my wife says, I said, hey, I got a promotion. She said, what? I said, I'm going to be an outside sales rep. She said, what's that? I said, I have no idea. But tomorrow I'm going to be one. She goes, really? I said, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it does. She goes, well, what are you going to do? I said, I really don't have any idea. So I got my suit. I went to Sears. I got 2 suits for $50. Sears closeout. Showed up the next morning, dropped my wife off, pulled up to the front, and I had my tie on, my suit, feeling sharp. I had my military shoes on. I shined up so you could check your teeth with them. I walked in, and there's Bill Proby and the manager for sales. And Bill says, you looking sharp, young man. I said, oh, yeah, I'm feeling sharp. And I said, all right, what do I do? And he goes, see that table right there? And there was a stack of folders, like three-page flyers for Lila Robin Company. And he said, take that, the Thomas Register, that map you used to have, that's how you got around. You learned how to use a Thomas Register. For you young people, we didn't have GPS. And he said, there's a list of 20 people to go see and $10 for gas. And I said, okay. I said, what do I tell him? He said, you'll figure it out. And I just kind of got that puppy dog, turned my head to look. And I'm like, I'm waiting for everybody to smile, right? I mean, is this a joke? And nobody's smiling. And I'm like, I'm starting to sweat. And I said, no, really, Bill. He said, do you want the job or not? I said, yeah, I want the job. He said, take that stuff and go. So I grabbed it and thinking, as I'm walking out the door, we're just messing with you. I walked out the door. I was like a little kid going to school for the first time. I looked back like, you're not going to call me back? Walked out, got in the Pinto, went to my first place. It was called Stusser Electric. I pull up, and luckily I'm young, and I just, I figured I could get through anything. And I just grabbed one of those catalog sheets and walked in the front, and there's a guy standing there, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I handed him the paper. I said, I'm Tim Jackson from Lila Robbins Company. He goes, oh, Lila Robbins. And he looks at it, and he's reading it. Now I have no idea what I'm going to say next. And he looks at me and goes, you want an order? I said, sure. And I just stood there. He said, do you have a pen and paper? I said, no. So we grabbed one of these counter tablets and a pen. He said, here, write this down. So I grabbed it, and he says, give me 10,000. Now, I just packaged screws in the back and just swept the floors. Honestly, I didn't know what we sold, what it was called, how it was ran. I wrote, give me 10,000. I wrote 10, TEN, THOUSAND, 10 by 3/4, TEN by BY 3/4, THREQUR. And I'm writing all this cursive out. And he's telling, give me 10,000 of this, 10,000 that, 5,000 this, and I'm sweating. There's sweat on the tablet, and I'm pulling the page, and I'm just writing as fast. And I'm like, I don't even know if I can reread this stuff. I'm writing so fast. I get about 5 pages, and at that point, I'm thinking, man, I hope he stops. And he goes, okay, that's it. And I said, okay. And I just stood there with pen in hand. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and he goes, you want a PO number? I said, sure. He said, PO number. I wrote PO number, PEAOHNUMBER. he said, he gave me the number, I wrote it down. And he looked at me, he goes, okay, go back to your office. I said, okay. And I said, do you want the tablet back? He said, no, son, you're probably going to need that.
Your first fastener
All right.
giveaway.
I grabbed my little tablet and I walked out to the car and I'm like, what the hell just happened? I'm thinking, I hope I got this right. So I go back to the office and Bill Proby says, young man, what are you doing back already? I said, I got a PO number. He said, Jesus Christ, you're a natural. And now I'm like in the warp zone. I'm like, what is going on? I'm a natural at what? And he looks at it and he goes, he got an order. We've never gotten an order from those guys. And again, I'm waiting for the punchline. I think maybe they just set me up, right?
That's what I was going to say. This whole thing sounds like a setup so far. What am I missing, Tim?
No, it gets better. He says, now go get the next one. I said, all right. And I went down to the next one was CED. Well, this time I grabbed the sheet. I had a little better idea. I walked in. I said, I'm Tim Jackson from Lila Robbins. I'm here to get a PO number. And the guy looks at me and says, damn, you're pushy. I said, well, buddy. He said, come back with me. And his name was Rick Eldoon. He ended up being a real good friend. And I went in the back and he really showed me what was going on. And I got 3 orders from the first 3 people I ever went to see. And that was the start of my career.
Wow.
Luck had everything to do with it.
Somebody was smiling on you. So is that what they call beginner's luck? Because we have something like that in muskie fishing.
Yes.
You know, where you take somebody out for the first time and they score a huge fish and, you know, you've been trying for years. And
it's sort of annoying.
Oh, yeah. I did that with Dave Monty from Fall River. He was out in my pontoon this year. He was up in the area. I've been fishing Lake Coeur d'Alene all year. He says, hey, you got your poles here. Can we fish a little bit? And I said, yeah. I said, just buy a license online. It's $20. He gets on his phone and shit. He's going as fast as he can. You can tell he's like, I want to fish. He's in his golfing outfit. He's got a little vest on, a shirt, and nice shoes. Grabs my fishing rod, throws it out. And as it hits the water, I see the bass hit it. I said, oh, shit. Bubba, you got a big one on there. He goes, no, it's not on there. I said, reel, quick. And he starts reeling. He got about a 5-pound bass. First cast, first time on the lake. He goes, what do you think? I said, you suck, man.
Classic.
Yeah.
You have no idea how many mornings I've been out here at 6 a.m. and fishing my butt off, and I haven't caught anything in this area. And then he starts sending Brian Wheeler, lives on the lake now, and he sends Brian Wheeler pictures. Hey, caught a fish. You know the deal. Luck.
Well, he hit it on the lake. You hit it in sales.
So these people you dealt with, they must have sort of taken pity on you there. I mean, that's...
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I was a 22, 23-year-old kid. You know, I had that excitement to get out, and, you know, out of the warehouse. And I had enthusiasm, if anything. You know, they always say enthusiasm sells.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. And all those guys that gave me orders became friends.
That's cool, actually.
I guess to actually hold true to the beginner's luck part of it, though, you have to then have a real dry spell for a prolonged period. And it sounds like you continue to do well. It's amazing. See that you're a man of action across the board, Tim.
It sounds good, don't
Yeah, it does.
Some actions were good, some actions were bad. I mean, you have your give and take, but overall, I can't complain. I tell people every day, how do you feel when you drive past action? I said, I love it. It's, you know, I dreamt that thing. And I look at that building and that name up there. I dreamt that years ago. And, you know, how did you do it? A lot of hard work. I can't really tell you how I did. I don't remember, but a lot of it was just, you know, auto. You get up every morning, you do what you got to do. You know, how'd you get through this? You know, it's just like the state of the market right now. The reason they invited me down here to this, speaking to all their salespeople and their staff, was they've got, you know, in general, inventory is high, prices are up, and replacement cost is down. And how do we get through that? And I told them, I said, listen, whenever I got into this position in sales or in a company, I just doubled down on sales. I know that sounds cliche-ish, but it's the truth. That's, you know, whining and crying and counting your inventory is not going to help, right? You got to get off your butt, make sure your salesmen are hitting on all cylinders, and go out there and have the driving force. And when something does open up, you're back in the market. You know, you got a little farm now, Bubba. You know, if you're going to raise corn, you got to get your plant, you get your field, plow it up, put the rows of core down, and pray they come up, right? And most of the time, you do it right. You got a garden, but nobody wants to pull the weeds. Nobody wants to go out there and water them. They just want, you know, the instant gratification, and it's not how it works. You know, I gave these guys a shot of adrenaline. I told them the first thing. The one good thing you got to know is everybody's in the same position. It's not 2 or 3 companies are out of line and the rest are in line. If prices are down and everybody's bought stock, everybody's stock is up. Now you just got to decide how are you going to get rid of it. We hold our margins, we're going to have few sales. If we lower our margins, we're going to push the inventory and get it out. I asked a bunch of guys in the industry, a few in Star, and I said, well, how do you handle this? And they said, we double down. You got to get through the inventory. It's a matter of fact. It has to happen. How do you want to get through it? You got to double down on your sales. You got to kick butt. You got to go out there and turn up some rocks, right? Lift up some rocks, see what's under there. Most people, I noticed when we got in this position locally, my competition would slow down. When it slowed down, they just kind of hid. Everybody got quiet. They didn't. There was not an aggressive move, and we doubled down every time.
Interesting. Okay.
You were warning about something like this last time you were on. You were explaining how everything going gangbusters was eventually going to end, and people should be prepared for it.
Yeah, I was at the Pac West show, and I think it was down by Disneyland, and I noticed everybody I asked, the small companies I knew and the few companies I knew, I said, how's it going? Man, Tim, it's going so good. We can't keep up. And I said, well, do you have a plan for when the storm hits? He goes, what storm? I said, well, at some point, I haven't bought 4 cars this year, so they can't make more cars. I haven't bought more houses. Everything I'm doing in life is pretty much the same, and everybody's usage is up. And I think everybody back then, I noticed companies locally here that had a safety factor of 1.25 now said, give me a safety factor of 2.25 or 2.5. I never want to run out of stock again. And that's great. But once they get full of stock, then there's a hiccup, right? And I noticed a lot of ARS systems, automatic replenishment systems, whatever they sold in the last 6 months, they automatically update that and make sure they have stock to cover that. Well, it was a fluke. It wasn't normal. And people that end up buying a lot of stock and are sitting on it now are in big trouble because prices are up. I heard the freights went down. Freight's not crazy like it was. So you get a large company and they're looking at their bottom line, they're going to press you. They know the market too.
Yep.
And I just said to them, I was just appalled that nobody had foresight to look ahead and say, we better be careful. You never know when the faucet's going to turn off. That's the problem. Is it 3 months, 6 months, a year? I don't know. But I think there's a few people out there caught with their pants down and a little bit more inventory. And, now if you're owned by a corporate company, they want to know why the numbers are off.
Yeah.
That's what I see.
So it sounds like you were down there delivering a sobering message with a big smile. I mean, I'm no doubt did it with your normal dose of comic relief, but how did they receive that message?
I was telling you earlier that when I got there, I haven't done any speaking to speak of, and pardon the pun. So I made up these notes. I made one sheet that had my stories on it. I could look down and get a reference. On the other sheet, I had helpful tips. And I sat up on that podium and had bright lights on me. And I start looking down and back up and down and back up. And I got dizzy. And I said, man, hang on a second. I got lightheaded. And so I picked up the podium. I moved it 4 feet left. I said, you don't need to see these lights for me. I said, I have a bright green shirt on. You can't miss me. And threw the notes away and just got on topic. And what I did is I just made it real for them. I talked about, the first thing I said, how many people run into the gatekeeper? And they all just kind of looked at me with everybody tilt their head at the same time. I said, that lady or that guy at the front desk that never lets you get to the real guy who makes the decisions. And they all looked at me and they start shaking their head, yes. And then I went into, this is what you do. This is how you get by them. And I made it comical, like you said. But it spoke to the times. And I talked about simple things like the KISS rule, keep it simple, stupid. I said, has anybody heard that? And a couple of people have been in the military, so they understood it. But it's really, for me, it's a lot of keep it simple, stupid. Don't complicate it. Go right to the point. Tell them why you're there. Tell them what you're going to offer them. Tell them your competitive edge, and just ask them for an order. And that's the next thing I asked. I said, Bill Proby told me when I first got into sales, he says, whatever you do, never leave without asking for the order. And I never did. To this day, every sales call I ever made, I asked them before I leave, I said, listen, before I leave, is there anything you need that someone's not taking care of I can help you with?
Great question.
And I'll bet you 75% of the time they go, I do have this one item. Now, it's usually not what I want to sell them. But if I can find them a person to sell to them or fix that problem they've got, I'm a hero. And you get orders after that.
It makes sense.
It's not rocket science like we were talking earlier, Brian. It's really simple.
So you developed a whole sales strategy after starting from ground zero. And how long did it take you to become really proficient after your beginner's luck? And then I'm sure you hit the skids for a while. How long did it take you to really get a feel for this business?
It's going to sound fake, but I was lucky enough to go to work for a guy named Jim Crutchfield. He worked for Cully Enterprises. And anybody that's ever met Jim Crutchfield will know he's probably the best salesman that ever was in our industry that I've seen. He was probably 50 years old back then, and I'm not exaggerating when I'm telling you, he made over $400,000 a year in commission at 10%. So that tells you how much of a drive he had. He had all of California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and I worked under him for probably a year, and it's the best year of my life for sales. I mean, it's just, the standard was so high that you couldn't help but succeed if you just follow half of what he did. And I was just a salary guy who didn't even get commission. And I just fell into it. And then one day I went in and said, "Hey, I want to make straight commission." And the guy said, "You can't do that." And I remember the day, it was December 15th, 1987, because my wife was pregnant and due with a baby in a month. And I said, "Well, I quit." And I went home that night. It wasn't very good. It's my wife's pregnant about to have a baby. She said, I said, "Hey, I wouldn't buy those Christmas gifts yet." She goes, "Why?" I said, "I quit my job this morning." You know the look. I got that look. I got the stare. And she said, "Have you lost your mind?" I said, "Maybe, but I'm gonna figure this out." I go back. Remember that guy I told you, Dave Hendricks, that gave me my first job? He went to another company called Allied Bolt in Seattle. And he started a company called ABC Fasteners that sold competitive to Cully. And I called him and I said, "Hey, I'm looking for a job." He goes, "We're looking for a salesman." The next day I went to that company, and the guy's name was Ken Summers. And I really wanted to make 10% commission. So I went in and with the idea, he said, "So what do you want, young man?" And he's put me at this long table. He was one end, I'm at the other. I'm in my London fog jacket. By then I'd figure out how to look sharp. I had a London fog jacket on, took it off, I had my suit on. He said, "What do you want?" And I said, "I want 15% commission." And he hollers, "15% commission? Are you out of your mind?" I said, "Now listen, this is why you should give it to me." And I told him the margins I was selling this product at. And he looked at me. And at that moment, I remember that sales tape I had heard. It said, "The next person who talks loses." And we sat there. And he looked at me and I looked at him. And I figured he's heard this tape before because he ain't saying nothing and I'm not saying nothing. We sat there, and if you know how long it is to sit there for a minute at a table while you're negotiating, it was horrible. And he smiled, I smiled, and he put his hand on the table. I put my hand on the table, and he smiled, I smiled. And I'm like, I was just getting ready to give in, just ready to give in. He goes, "Okay, you got a deal."
Nice.
I thought to myself, "Oh my God, I got 15%. So I shook his hand, said, "Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow." And he hired me, and I went in. My first paycheck was $5,400, and I never in my career made less than that a month. And I just went out, and that's how I got the nickname Action Jackson. I hustled. I didn't have a guarantee. So every day I got up and ran to the next customer. I bought one of those big old brick phones and had about $1,000 bill a month. And my wife's like, "Are you crazy?" I said, "Honey, I make more money with this phone than anything else because stuck in traffic in Seattle, I could call back and call in orders." And from there, I just went gangbusters, and actually got fired from that job because I got too lazy, which I explained to people. Most salesmen, I say this, and it cover your ears if you don't want to hear this, but most salesmen are lazy and disorganized. That's just a fact, because I'm one of them. And I've tried my whole career to make sure I hone that skill down to where I'm not lazy. When I say lazy, I don't mean you don't get up to go to work. I mean, you go in and you promise 3 things to a customer and you only provide 2 of them because you're like, he probably don't need that cut sheet like he said. And I told these guys that's more important. If you say you're going to do 5 things, you better do 5 things because they don't forget. And how many times have you come into your customer and he's like, "Yeah, I just noticed there's a pallet of screws out there." "Yeah, your competition came in." And I just thought, I just felt bad for him. Most of the time it's because you didn't follow through on a couple of things you said and he needed a backup. So I just went over the simple things in sales. I motivated them, told them some funny stories, and I raised the bar for a lot of them, and they could relate. There was 20 people in the room, I think, and I looked at 2 of these guys, and they were older guys. I said, "How long have you been in the business?" And he said 40-something years, and this guy said 40-something years. And I said, "How many of you people call these guys or text these 2?" And nobody raised their hand. I said, "There's 90 years of tribal knowledge right there. 90 years.
Oh, well, now you've struck on another one of these recurrent issues. I think actually last time you were talking with us, you were hammering on that whole idea of tribal knowledge too, weren't you?
Well, I guess something happened there because there was just a sheet that came out from Pac West. One of my buddies in Pac West sent me a little text and said, "Hey, we're doing this thing for business development, and can you write down the same thing I sent you?" Was Eric is tell me your top 3 things you think about business. And he says, "Can you put a paragraph together? And what do you tell people?" And I thought about it. I said, "There's a lot. Hell, I'm full of stories." And I said, "Well," and I put down 11 bullet points, simple ones. Keep it simple, stupid. Don't overthink it. Lift people up, because when you lift them up, then they'll end up lifting you up. Be positive. Just little cliches like that. And it got printed, and I was amazed it got printed. But I'm thankful. But it's not hard. At least for me, I take on business as a challenge, and it's like a golf game for me. I want to do better than I did last month or last year. I wasn't the brightest guy in the room, but I definitely worked as hard as anybody in the room.
Well, sustained action counts for a lot, and that's what you're good at, Tim. Let me ask you this. When you are out now selling these consulting jobs, do you have the same approach that you took when you were selling actual fasteners?
Yeah.
I mean, how are you driving this part of your business in this new chapter in your career?
These are usually referrals. I'm not out actively pushing, speaking, training salesmen. The first one I did was a company. I went down and consult with this company, and I spent a week there. And in the last speaking engagement, both of them were references. Somebody called me and said, "Hey, they need a speaker here. Would you be interested?" And I was doing him a favor, and it was fun. The pay is good. I can't complain of the pay. The pay's amazing.
Right. So you're not going to turn down any business that might come in from a random podcast appearance is what we're building to, will you?
Probably not. But, to me, it's more about the people. I love teaching sales. Sales comes natural to me. I had a grandfather and a dad who were great horse salesmen, horse whisper, they're wheeler dealer guys. And that's kind of where I got my base. I'm amazed how many people don't hire somebody to come in and teach your sales staff. And I'm not plugging for myself. I'm simply just telling you this is the truth. I see a lot of people managing salespeople that aren't salesmen. And that's a tough gig, because salesmen are notoriously, I wouldn't say manipulative, but they're very good at dodging certain things. And I think you need a salesman to come in and meet a salesman head on and say, "Okay, where are you at? Where are you going? What are you trying to accomplish? And what are your steps to get there?"
Right. Sales management is a very, very underappreciated skill, but the good ones are worth their weight in platinum.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not pushing for myself, but that's my skill set. I mean, if you had anything to say, what are you good at? I'm good at helping guys get in and get the sale. I mastered that in my book, because I had great mentors. And how many people don't self-help? How many people are listening to CDs and cassettes? I asked that in the room. Nobody held up their hand at all. So you're not going out and finding other ways to do your job better. That should be number one. Every week, I told them, and that's one of my parts on that sheet I did for Pac West. I said, I had to learn. I didn't know anything about fasteners when I got into it. So how do I educate myself? I took that Link magazine and I read an article. There was one in the bathroom, one out in my car, one at home next to the bed. Every time I got a chance, I read an article. Did it make sense? Not at the time, but over time, oh, I get it. It's starting. Now I'm starting to see a pattern here. There were experts in there about technical and bolting and that damn hydrogen embrittlement, which I hate.
Eric's favorite subject.
Oh, it makes me shiver. I hate that. But that's how I learn, and I don't see guys doing that these days. They're just going out, making calls, and putting in their sales report, and away we go.
Well, Tim, you have a lot of knowledge to impart. If there's somebody listening to this particular conversation, they want to energize their sales force, how do they reach out to you?
I don't know if I want to give my email out here, but I guess I can. It's TJ. Yes, it's old because I used the same email at Action. And I lost it when I sold the company. I wasn't smart enough to keep it. TJ33action@hotmail.com. Yes, Hotmail. I know it's old, but I still use it and everything's attached to it, so I'm not changing. Reach out to me. I'll give you my 2 cents. And I just absolutely love working with salesmen. And I love doing that speech where I got to speak to everybody for 90 minutes. But I would love to go out and work one-on-one with each salesperson at a company. I suggested that they hire me to come out and go out and make a route with them. There's always things you can do better. When you have somebody else in the room, if Brian went out with you and he heard you, he would say, oh, did you notice this? Because maybe you didn't see the 4 items on the side. The biggest thing I told him was, how many guys in this room here go into a customer for the first time and ask them to take a tour of their company? No hands went up. I said, I ask every time. Give me a chance to take a tour of your company. One, I can spy and see what you buy. I can see how your operation runs and see if there's something I can help you save you money, that's imperative. That's what they're looking for. They don't want we all sell the same stuff. We buy from the same people. What makes you different than the next guy? The company that bought my company, how I got in the door was, it's going to sound terrible, but it's the truth. We were in business 2 or 3 years, and my salesman had been calling on him for a year. And he came back in, and Scotty looks at me and says, I said, hey, how's it going with PDU? And he goes, I've been in there every week for a year and nothing. It was one of those days I wasn't in a great mood. So I pick up the phone and I said, hey, are you going to, I talked to the guy, I said, is this such and such? He said, yeah. I said, hey, I appreciate you seeing my salesman, but are you going to just hold your hand on my butt all night long, or are we going to dance? And he goes, well, smart Aleck, quote this. And he sent me a $40,000 quote. Now, Bubba, at the time, $40,000 was my whole month's worth of sales at best. And I looked at it and it said, $25,000 of a 5/8 by 2 A205 Alumilite aluminum coating. I said, Bubba, you know what that is? No. Hell, I don't know what that is either. I've never heard of that. Got in the Link magazine, found somebody that advertised it, called him. 30 minutes later, I sent him a quote. I wasn't sure what to quote it on, so I put a minimum margin on it. The guy goes, here's a PO number. I said, holy crap. No one will ever believe this story. And from that, I did way over $1.5 million of business a year with that guy.
Wow. Yeah, Tracy's going to love that story.
Yeah.
Oh, what the funny thing was too is I had another customer, McClendon Hardware, and they were doing about $750,000 with me. I ended up firing them in a very nice, polite way. I mean, we left amicably. And because I knew this other company had so much more potential. And it was 3 months before 2007 hit. That was scary. And that customer that I stuck with, I got lucky, and they boomed after the 2007. They went crazy because it was a lot of government stuff.
Wow.
But that's ask for the order. That's what I did. I did it in kind of a shrewd way, but it was funny.
Ask for the order. I guess that's going to be the takeaway from this conversation, Tim. You've been doing that for a long time. You're good at it. If people want to talk to you, punch that email out there one more time, Tim.
TJ33action@hotmail.com. I'll gladly have a conversation with you.
All right. You're doing stuff. You're around these days and you're sniffing around, keeping relevant, keeping interested, keeping busy, and you keep on selling. That's because you're Action Jackson.
Right.
That's what they tell me.
That's what you tell yourself.
Always good to talk to you, Tim. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Think of what you'd want to be, then call on me.
I want to fly a strap-on helicopter.
Action Jackson. Action Jackson. Action Jackson. Action Jackson.
I want to drive a scramble cycle.